The wind howled across the frozen plains, shaking the metal walls of the human outpost. Snow and ice whipped through the air and visibility was almost zero. Foreman Ravel Corin pulled his coat tighter and adjusted his thermal goggles, scanning the horizon. The storm was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Sensors inside the outpost warned of falling temperatures, ice buildup, and the risk of structural failure. Every living thing outside was in danger. Ravel's boots crunched on the hard snow as he made his rounds. The usual warnings of wildlife or mechanical malfunctions seemed small compared to the storm outside. The wind roared in his ears and the cold bit through layers of insulation. It was then that he noticed something unusual. A massive shadow moved through the swirling snow, something too large and heavy to be a wolf or a polar predator. He stopped, squinting, trying to make sense of it. The shadow grew closer. With each step he could see massive limbs, long tails, and jagged frost-covered wings. His heart raced. Dragons. On this planet, dragons were rare, wild, and often dangerous. They were powerful creatures, meant to be admired from a distance, or feared. And yet, these dragons were not attacking. They were struggling, their movements slow and pained. Ravel froze as he saw the first dragon collapse into the snow, scales coated in frost. Another followed, dragging a smaller, shivering hatchling between them. The little dragon's tiny body trembled violently, its wings folded tightly against it. One adult lowered its head, eyes soft but pleading, clearly asking for help. Ravel's mind raced. Letting a dragon inside the outpost could risk everyone's life. Humans were not equipped to handle dragons in tight spaces, especially in a storm. And yet, leaving them outside meant certain death. The hatchling's weak cries echoed in the wind, breaking through his hesitation. "Damn it," he muttered to himself. "I can't just let them freeze." He ran back to the outpost, pressing emergency codes into the terminal. Alarms blared, warning the workers inside. "Security breach. Open perimeter gates immediately." Ravel shouted into the comms. His team hesitated, unsure if they should follow orders. Most humans had never seen dragons this close, and fear hung heavy in the air. "Ravel, are you crazy?" one worker yelled. "Do you know what could happen?" "I don't care." Ravel snapped. "They'll die if we don't help. Open the gates now." With reluctant compliance, the gates began to slide open. The wind rushed in, bringing with it the stench of ice and snow, but also the sight of the dragon family struggling closer. Ravel stepped forward, arms raised, signaling them inside. The first adult dragon hesitated, glancing at the storm and then at Ravel. The pleading in its eyes was unmistakable. Slowly it moved forward, dragging its family behind. Ravel guided them to a sealed cargo bay, the only space large enough to hold creatures of that size. The snow and frost fell from their scales as they entered, and the warmth of the outpost touched them for the first time in hours. Workers watched from the observation windows, their mouths open in shock. The dragons did not roar or attack. They simply collapsed near the heated floor, shivering and weak. The hatchling whimpered softly, curling into the adult dragon's legs. Ravel moved quickly, activating thermal blankets, energy coils, and portable heaters. He worked efficiently, positioning the devices to warm the dragons without harming them. Each human in the room held their breath, unsure what to expect. Dragons were proud, dangerous, and unpredictable, but these creatures seemed to understand that they were being offered help. One worker whispered, They're letting us help them?" Ravel nodded, though he kept his eyes on the frost-covered wings and scales. "Yes, they're asking for it. Don't make sudden movements. Let them feel safe." 4 hours, Ravel and his team worked to stabilize the dragon's temperature. The hatchling trembled less with each passing minute, and the adult dragons began to lift their heads slightly, eyes cautious but calmer. It was a delicate balance. Too much heat could injure them, too little and they would not survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the dragons began to show signs of life. The hatchling moved its wings slightly, and one adult pushed its snout against Ravel's arm in a small gesture of gratitude. The scene was quiet, almost surreal, as humans and dragons shared a fragile moment of trust. Ravel stepped back, exhaustion hitting him like a wave. The storm outside still raged, but inside, the cargo bay was filled with warmth and hope. He realized that this decision, choosing to help when it seemed impossible, had changed everything. The dragons had come seeking shelter, and Ravel had given it to them. What would happen next he did not know. But for now the immediate danger had passed. He looked at the hatchling, shivering but alive, and felt something stir in his chest. This was no longer just a job or an outpost. This was the beginning of something new, something neither humans nor dragons had expected. Outside, the storm roared on, indifferent to the fragile lives beneath it. Inside, a human foreman and a dragon family began a story that would change the frozen frontier forever. The storm outside continued to rage, snow and ice battering the walls of the human outpost. Inside, the cargo bay was filled with warmth, steam rising from the heaters and blankets that Ravel had set up around the dragon family. The adult dragons lay low, muscles tense, their breaths heavy and visible in the cold air. The hatchling curled near the largest dragon, trembling slightly, still weak from the storm. Ravel moved cautiously among them, careful not to make sudden gestures. The workers had gathered near the observation windows, whispering anxiously. Most of them had never seen dragons up close and some were openly fearful. Humans and dragons were not meant to share space, especially in confined quarters, and yet here they were. One worker finally spoke up. "Ravel, are you sure this is safe? They could turn on us at any moment." Ravel did not flinch. He met the worker's gaze and shook his head. "They are exhausted. They are not here to fight. If we treat them with care, they will respond the same way. We have a chance to save them, and ourselves, if we handle this correctly." The largest adult dragon lifted its head slightly, frost melting along its jagged scales. Its eyes, golden and cautious, studied Ravel. There was a silent communication between them, an unspoken question, a challenge. Ravel felt the weight of it. One wrong move and this fragile trust could shatter. He moved toward a set of emergency heaters, adjusting the temperature to warm the dragons gradually. Too much heat could injure them, too little and they would not recover. The hatchling let out a small whimper as warmth touched its icy scales. Ravel knelt beside it, careful not to reach out too quickly. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you." The other humans watched in stunned silence as the dragons responded in kind. The large dragon slowly extended a claw, not aggressively, but in a way that seemed almost like a gesture of trust. Another worker gasped. "They're listening to him?" Ravel nodded. "Yes. They know we mean no harm. That's why I asked you all to stay calm and follow instructions." Over the next few hours, Ravel and his team worked methodically to stabilize the dragons. The hatchling began to move more confidently, curling around the warmth of the heaters. The adult dragons adjusted their positions to shield it, keeping a careful watch on the humans. Every movement was deliberate, a quiet negotiation of trust. Ravel used a portable scanner to monitor their vital signs. The readings were difficult to interpret. Dragons were not human, but he made notes and shared observations with his medics. "Keep the temperature steady," he instructed. "Make sure the blankets don't press too hard against their scales. And don't touch them unless I say so." The dragons seemed to understand the instructions, not in words but in instinct. They shifted slightly when heat was adjusted, lowered their bodies when humans approached, and even let small items like blankets or heaters be placed around them. The tension in the room slowly eased as the humans realized the dragons were not threatening. They were cautious, wary, and intelligent. By nightfall, the storm outside showed no sign of weakening. Inside, however, the dragons had begun to relax. The hatchling stretched its tiny wings, testing the warmth and safety of the environment. The adult dragons lowered their heads, eyes softening, and seemed to watch Ravel with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. Ravel finally allowed himself to take a breath. "They're going to survive the storm," he said quietly to one of the medics. "And they're responding better than I expected." The medics exchanged glances, still unsure of what to think. One whispered, "They're almost like they understand us. Like they know we saved them." Ravel smiled faintly. "They do. Dragons are intelligent creatures. They remember kindness and respect." For the first time, the human team saw the possibility of coexistence. This was not an enemy to fear, nor a wild beast to control. These dragons were living, breathing beings who needed help, and could give something back in return. As the hours passed, Ravel continued to observe and adjust the environment. He monitored heat levels, checked for frost damage, and even began noting the subtle ways the dragons communicated with each other and with him. The hatchling chirped softly, nudging a warm blanket closer, while the adults watched attentively. There was no hostility, no aggression, only cautious trust. A few of the workers, initially fearful, began to take small steps forward. They brought water and food carefully, following Ravel's instructions. The dragons accepted these offerings, though slowly and deliberately. It was a delicate balance, a dance of respect between two very different species. By late night, the storm had reached its peak, battering the outpost with snow and wind. Yet inside, the dragons rested, their bodies slowly recovering. Ravel finally allowed himself to sit near the hatchling, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. "You're safe," he whispered. "I promise you're safe here." The hatchling nudged his hand gently, a small act that felt like acknowledgement. The adult dragons lowered their heads slightly, as if bowing in silent gratitude. Ravel realized that he had crossed a threshold few humans ever reached. He had earned the trust of dragons. Outside, the storm showed no mercy, but inside the cargo bay humans and dragons coexisted under the same roof. For the first time, Ravel felt that this shelter was more than just protection from the cold. It was a bridge between two species, a place where fear and suspicion could be replaced with understanding. And as he watched the dragons begin to rest, he knew that this night, dangerous as it had been, would be remembered. The storm had brought them together, forcing humans and dragons to share space, warmth, and trust. What had begun as a terrifying encounter had slowly transformed into the beginning of an unexpected alliance, one that could change the frozen frontier forever. Ravel looked at the hatchling curled in warmth, then at the adult dragons watching over it. He whispered softly, "We'll get through this together. You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in the long, frozen night, humans and dragons slept under the same roof, cautiously trusting one another, knowing that survival depended not on fear or force, but on understanding and care. The storm had lasted all night, but by morning, a pale sun barely broke through the icy clouds. Inside the cargo bay, the dragon family had begun to recover. The hatchling moved slowly, wings stretching as warmth seeped into its frozen muscles. The adults rose, their golden and silver scales catching the dim light, still cautious but calmer than before. Ravel Corin paced slowly near them, studying their movements. He could feel their intelligence, the way they watched him, learning and calculating. He had saved their lives, but he did not yet understand the reason they had come to this frozen world. One of the adult dragons lowered its head, eyes locking with his. There was a quiet urgency in the gaze, as if it wanted him to understand something important. Ravel crouched slightly, careful not to startle them. He whispered, "I need to know why you are here. Why did you risk the storm?" The hatchling let out a soft chirp, almost like encouragement. Then the adult dragon nudged a patch of frost on the floor, uncovering a small glowing crystal embedded in the ice. It shimmered with a soft light, pulsing gently. Ravel leaned closer. The crystal was unlike anything he had seen before, almost alive, and it seemed to carry memories or knowledge within it. He realized that the dragons were trying to communicate. Not with words, but through symbols and their instincts. The family had fled a frozen territory, a place that had been their home for centuries, now destroyed by unexpected climate failure. Their journey had been desperate, and the storm had nearly killed them. Ravel understood then that this was not an invasion. The dragons were survivors, seeking refuge in the only place they could find warmth and shelter. The hatchling had fallen behind during the journey, and the adults had guided it here, begging for help from humans they had probably feared as much as the frozen winds. As he watched them carefully, he noticed subtle gestures. The hatchling moving toward the heaters, the adults curling around it protectively, their heads lowering in trust when he approached. He realized that dragons, despite their strength and power, were capable of understanding kindness, even from humans. One of the medics approached cautiously, holding a small warming pack designed for human use. Ravel stopped them. "Wait. Let me adjust it first. Dragons are not human. Their bodies respond differently. One wrong move could harm them." He worked methodically, using data from sensors and previous research to calculate safe heat levels. The hatchling let out a soft trill as warmth touched its icy scales. Its tiny wings twitched, testing the sensation. The adult dragons relaxed slightly, recognizing the careful attention. Hours passed as Ravel and his team adjusted temperatures, monitored vital signs, and ensured that the dragons were stable. Slowly, color returned to the hatchling's scales, and its breathing steadied. The adults began moving with more strength, shaking off frost and stretching their wings. During a quiet moment, the largest adult dragon nudged a small tablet toward Ravel. On it were images of their frozen nesting grounds, covered in ice and snow, and symbols that seemed to explain the migration route they had taken. Ravel realized the family had traveled far, risking death to reach the outpost. He felt a mix of awe and responsibility. These were not just creatures, they were guardians of their species, ancient and intelligent, now relying on humans to survive. Ravel knew he had to protect them, not just from the storm but from any humans who might not understand. The hatchling chirped again, and the adult dragons lowered their heads toward it. Ravel noticed a glowing mark appearing faintly on the floor beneath them, a symbol he did not recognize at first. It pulsed gently, a sign of life and gratitude. He realized it was a dragon symbol meaning life debt. They would remember this act and somehow it mattered to them. As the day progressed, Ravel documented everything. He recorded the dragon's behavior, their responses to heat, and the subtle ways they communicated with each other and with humans. He understood that they were teaching him about their needs, their intelligence, and their memory. The hatchling, now standing steadily, let out a chirp that sounded almost like laughter. The adults watched it with soft eyes and then slowly turned to look at Ravel. There was no threat in the gaze, only recognition. They had survived because of him, and in return they offered trust, a fragile yet powerful bond. Ravel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. For centuries, dragons and humans had lived separate lives, often in fear or misunderstanding. Now, in this small cargo bay on a frozen world, he realized that the future could be different. Respect and kindness had crossed the barrier between species. He spoke softly, almost to himself, "You survived, and I will do everything I can to keep you safe." The hatchling chirped and nudged his hand, and for the first time, he felt a sense of connection that went beyond duty or survival. As night fell, the storm outside lessened slightly, but the dragons remained inside, calm and alert. Ravel knew the danger was not over. This world was harsh and other humans might not understand. But the truth was clear. These dragons were not invaders or threats. They were survivors and they had come seeking life. Ravel looked at the hatchling nestled between the adults, then at the glowing crystal on the floor. He realized that their survival depended on cooperation, understanding, and trust. He had seen the truth beneath the ice. Dragons were not monsters. They were intelligent, social creatures capable of loyalty, memory, and gratitude. And for the first time Ravel felt hope. If humans and dragons could work together here on this frozen world, perhaps the future could be brighter than anyone had imagined. As he prepared blankets, heaters, and warming packs for the night, he thought quietly, "This is only the beginning. If we survive the storm, we will find a way forward, together." The hatchling chirped softly, curling against the warmth of the heaters. The adult dragons lowered their heads slightly toward Ravel. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside there was a fragile peace. A truth had been revealed. Survival was not just about strength, it was about trust, care, and understanding across species. And in that moment, Ravel understood that he had not only saved lives but also discovered a bridge between humans and dragons. A bridge that could change everything. The storm had finally slowed, leaving a quiet, icy world outside the outpost. Ravel Corin stood near the cargo bay, watching the dragon family move more confidently across the heated floor. The hatchling stretched its wings, the scales gleaming in the soft light. The adult dragons circled gently around it, their eyes alert but calm. Inside, the outpost felt almost peaceful, a fragile calm that Ravel knew could not last. By midday, communications arrived from the Frontier Command. The video feed from the outpost was being reviewed at multiple stations. Humans were shocked and curious. Dragons, alive and unharmed, were being sheltered inside a human facility. Orders came swiftly and strictly. The dragons were not supposed to be there. Protocol demanded they be removed and returned to their frozen territory immediately, no matter the risk. Ravel listened to the orders with a growing sense of determination. He knew sending them back would mean certain death. The hatchling, still weak but alert, chirped softly as if sensing his thoughts. The adult dragons pressed close to the human who had saved them, and Ravel realized he could not comply. He had to protect them no matter the consequences. When the officials arrived, they were cautious, armed with authority rather than weapons. Their eyes widened at the sight of dragons inside the human shelter, creatures that should have been dangerous and hostile, yet now seemed calm and curious. One officer stepped forward. "Foreman Corin, you must return these dragons to the frozen zone. It is protocol. They do not belong here." Ravel shook his head firmly. "They will not survive out there. I am responsible for their safety, and I refuse to endanger them." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Dragons were powerful and humans were not meant to interfere. Yet there was something in Ravel's voice, a quiet, unwavering determination, that made them pause. The largest dragon lowered its head slightly, a subtle gesture of support for Ravel. The others remained calm, not aggressive but clearly ready to follow his lead. The hatchling chirped, flapping its tiny wings in the warmth of the cargo bay. The humans around them could see it. These were not wild monsters. They were intelligent beings capable of trust, gratitude, and cooperation. Ravel stood between the officials and the dragons. "Look at them," he said softly. "They are alive because we helped them. They are not here to harm us. If you send them back, they will die. And we will lose the chance to understand them, to learn from them, to work with them." The officers hesitated. The outpost had survived countless storms, but never a situation like this. One officer finally asked, "And you believe they will cooperate with humans?" Ravel nodded. "They already have. They are intelligent, aware, and capable of following rules. I trust them. I ask you to trust them too." The officers studied the dragons carefully. The creatures did not move aggressively. They watched the humans with curiosity, not hostility. Slowly, understanding began to spread among the officials. They realized this was not an encounter with wild dragons, it was a chance for coexistence. The hatchling chirped again, moving closer to Ravel, and one adult nudged it protectively. A soft glow from the dragon's scales reflected off the cargo bay walls, almost like a silent plea. It was clear that these dragons recognized Ravel as a protector, not an enemy. Word of the incident spread across the frontier network. Humans from nearby outposts and settlements began tuning in, watching the feed. Many were skeptical at first, but as they observed the dragon's calm behavior and Ravel's careful guidance, opinions began to shift. Humans began to understand that dragons could be allies, not threats, if treated with respect and care. As news reached distant outposts, more humans arrived. Scientists, medics, and explorers, all curious to study this remarkable interaction. They were careful, following Ravel's instructions, and the dragons responded with the same calm, intelligent behavior they had shown from the beginning. The frozen world outside still posed dangers, but inside the shelter, something extraordinary was happening. Humans and dragons were learning to coexist. They shared space, warmth, and trust. And slowly, Ravel realized that the shelter itself had become a symbol, a bridge between two species that had never truly understood each other. Days passed and the dragons grew stronger. The hatchling began to explore the outpost cautiously, testing doors, corridors, and equipment. The adults followed, guiding it, teaching it in subtle ways. The humans adapted as well, learning how to interact without causing fear or stress. Ravel supervised, observing every interaction, documenting behavior, and adjusting procedures. One evening, as the pale sun set over the icy horizon, Ravel watched the hatchling curl against the largest dragon. The adults lowered their heads toward him in a silent gesture of acknowledgement, almost like a promise. He felt the weight of responsibility but also a profound sense of hope. Ravel knew the world outside might never fully accept this partnership, but for now, here in the shelter, humans and dragons had discovered something rare: cooperation, understanding, and trust. It was not the strength of humans alone that had achieved this, nor the power of dragons. It was compassion, courage, and the willingness to see the truth beneath fear and protocol. And in that moment, the frozen frontier no longer felt like a harsh, unyielding place. It felt like the beginning of something new, something neither humans nor dragons had dared to imagine. The storm outside had faded, leaving a cold but clear world. Inside the shelter, humans and dragons moved together carefully, learning, observing, and slowly building a bond that could change everything. Ravel realized that this was only the beginning. Their actions, small as they seemed, had the power to reshape the relationship between species on this harsh, frozen planet. As the first stars appeared in the icy sky, Ravel whispered to the hatchling, "We'll face the world together, little one." The hatchling chirped softly in response, and the adults lowered their heads toward him, a silent promise of protection and trust. The frontier had noticed, the world had watched, and for the first time humans and dragons were not enemies under the same roof, they were partners. Months had passed since the storm that had brought the dragon family to the human outpost. The frozen world outside had begun to thaw slightly, though ice and snow still covered the plains. Inside the shelter, life had changed in ways no one could have expected. Dragons and humans now shared space, routines, and even small moments of care. The hatchling, stronger and more confident, often explored the corridors, watched closely by its parents. Foreman Ravel Corin walked through the outpost, checking the adjustments they had made to accommodate the dragons. Doors had been widened, floors reinforced, and heating systems upgraded. Humans and dragons moved together without fear. The adults now allowed some interaction, nudging humans gently and observing their actions. Trust had grown into cooperation, and cooperation had grown into something stronger: friendship. Scientists and medics from nearby colonies visited regularly, fascinated by the dragon's behavior and biology. They studied how dragons could survive in extreme cold, how they communicated, and even how their presence seemed to help regulate temperature in the shelter. Ravel oversaw all interactions, ensuring that neither humans nor dragons were stressed. Every day the shelter became a small hub of learning and understanding, a place where both species benefited. The hatchling chirped happily as Ravel entered the cargo bay. It flapped its wings, nearly knocking over a small crate of tools, and then rolled playfully toward him. He laughed softly, careful not to startle it. One of the adult dragons nudged the hatchling gently, then looked at Ravel, eyes bright with recognition. It was clear, they considered him part of their family. Ravel smiled and whispered, "You've grown strong. I'm proud of you." The day continued with quiet activity. Workers and dragons moved in tandem, carrying supplies, adjusting equipment, and maintaining the shelter. Humans learned to anticipate the dragon's needs. A shaded area when the sun was strong, a heated floor patch when the dragons rested, and space for the hatchling to play safely. In turn, the dragons adjusted naturally to human routines, following directions and responding to gentle guidance. One morning, as Ravel oversaw maintenance in the outer corridors, a team of explorers arrived. They had heard of the outpost where humans and dragons coexisted and came to see it for themselves. At first, they were cautious, eyes wide as the adult dragons spread their wings and the hatchling chirped in excitement. Ravel approached them calmly. "Do not fear," he said. "They are not here to attack. They are survivors just like us. If you move carefully, you can observe them safely." The explorers watched in awe as the dragons interacted with humans naturally, even affectionately. The adults nudged equipment gently to help the workers, and the hatchling attempted to mimic human movements, clumsily lifting small tools. One explorer whispered, "I never imagined this, humans and dragons working together." Ravel nodded. "Neither did I. But it is possible. Respect, care, and trust are stronger than fear or protocol." Word of the outpost spread quickly across frontier colonies. Scientists, engineers, and curious travelers arrived, all eager to witness the cooperation firsthand. The dragons became local heroes in their own right, symbols of the potential for peaceful coexistence. Humans learned new ways to approach challenges, inspired by the dragons' intelligence and patience. Dragons, in turn, gained allies and protection, something they had never expected from humans. The outpost began to thrive. Energy systems improved, structures became more durable, and survival on the frozen world became more manageable. The dragon's natural abilities helped regulate temperatures, detect ice instability, and even warn of incoming storms. Humans provided technology, warmth, and guidance, ensuring safety for all. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. Ravel often spent evenings with the hatchling. He watched it curl near the heaters, wings slightly spread, golden eyes reflecting light. The adult dragons rested nearby, occasionally nudging him or the hatchling in acknowledgement. For Ravel, the greatest reward was not the survival of the species or the efficiency of the outpost, it was the quiet bond that had formed. Trust had grown into mutual care, and care had grown into friendship. One night, as pale stars twinkled over the frozen plains, Ravel looked around the shelter. Humans and dragons moved quietly, tending to tasks, sharing warmth, and observing each other with gentle curiosity. The storm that had brought them together was long gone, but its lessons remained. He realized that this small shelter had changed something far greater than the buildings inside. It had changed hearts. The hatchling chirped softly and nudged Ravel's hand. He smiled, stroking the soft scales lightly. One of the adults lowered its head, letting him touch it without fear. The gesture spoke louder than words. Humans and dragons could coexist, could protect and care for each other, and could even form bonds stronger than fear or instinct. Ravel felt a quiet pride. He had started as a foreman, responsible for survival in a harsh world. Now he was a bridge between species, a guide and protector in a new era. The dragons had saved lives by seeking help, and humans had saved lives by offering it. Together they had created something extraordinary, a shelter not just of walls and heat, but of understanding and cooperation. Outside, the frozen world continued to challenge them, but inside, humans and dragons thrived. Each day brought new lessons, new experiences, and new ways to work together. The hatchling learned quickly, the adults guided patiently, and the humans adapted with respect. It was a partnership built on trust, patience, and courage. Ravel looked at the hatchling again. "You see," he whispered, "this shelter isn't just a building. It's a new beginning, for both of us." The hatchling chirped, spreading its tiny wings, and nudged him in agreement. The adult dragons pressed close, a silent affirmation of unity. For the first time, Ravel felt that humanity and dragons could coexist not just here but across the frozen frontier. Compassion and courage had created a bond neither species could have imagined. And in that small shelter, life was no longer about surviving storms, it was about thriving together. As stars twinkled and the frozen wind howled beyond the outpost walls, humans and dragons rested side by side. The shelter had changed them both, proving that understanding, care, and trust could overcome fear, cold, and isolation. And so, the frozen world had found a new story, one where humans and dragons, once distant and wary, shared warmth, protection, and friendship, creating a future neither could have faced alone.